We're going to take a brief look now at the unruly faction, the women and men who were not bound so tightly by those comportment texts, those biblical texts, and so on. And really, in a way, we're going to look at the upending of the patriarchal structure in ways in which it unravels in the general populace. So in early modern England, some forms of neighborhood, this idea of neighborhood, were alien to what we would think of as neighborly. They had rough justice, which was neighborly justice. So midwives would force unwed mothers in labor to confess the names of their fathers. Neighbors spied on each other and took part in shaming rituals to drive unwed mothers and disliked couples, not just unwed mothers, but disliked couples from the town. Women tormented their neighbors by throwing horns and mocking rhymes into their yards or performing insulting songs and jigs about their floors. Some women defamed others with the simple word whore, and while elaborate narratives of incontinent disease, and with elaborate narratives of incontinence, disease, and duplicity. Many people assisted in witch trials, probing for witch teats or testifying about the dark powers of their neighbors that they had known all their lives, and even sending some to their deaths. So it was pretty horrific. And this was a way for society to regulate each other. So uneducated society regulating each other, sometimes in not such a great way, and sometimes certainly to the detriment of the person who's being corralled or accused of what have you. It's worth considering, however, that they also club together against obnoxious and dangerous men. So while women may fight against other women, they may have neighborly disputes that were not easily resolved. They also grew together as a group to give in solidarity, if you will, for want of a better word. And these groups would gather together to punish obnoxious or dangerous men that they saw as really in opposition to their well-being. So these groups of women, gossips as they were often known, could be a potent force in the life of the local community, without a doubt. They would cooperate in order to punish and put pressure on men who did not behave. And this could run the range from husbands who beat women, husbands who cheated on women, husbands who were stingy to their wives. There's a whole list of things that they did. So these women would turn to their friends, and they would often get support and protection from them. There are many songs, jests, woodcuts, and etchings that, if you do a basic internet search, it will pull up these women seeking rough justice from men who misbehaved. And that could go from anywhere from beating them, drenching them in water. They could be made to ride skimmington, which is a very strange ritual, whereby the man was forced to ride backwards on a horse, which you would see in this image here, riding backwards on the horse, to being beaten by keys, which was quite painful. And this riding backwards on a horse was, they would have to go all the way through the town with people ringing bells, jingling, yelling, screaming, beating drums. It was a kind of public humiliation, ritual humiliation. Very often, priests who had been attacking other women, or priests who were trying to have illegal sexual relations with other women, were attacked by those women. There were all kinds of rough justice eked out by women. So on the one hand, again, you have these seemingly unruly women, although they weren't. They had a very specific agenda in mind, right? So with their friends, they tried to make sure that men behaved according to the way they were supposed to behave within marriage. And when they didn't have recourse to the law, they would take it into their own hands. So we're juxtaposing that against these upper class women, these sort of these upper middle class, but really wasn't such much of a middle class. As we saw before, it's mostly a merchant class. But we have that class of women who are within a very strict confine. Everybody's educated. Everybody participates in the same language. Everybody has the same way of living. It's very different from these women who are eking out rough justice. I want you to bear in mind one other thing before I end this short lecture on this, and that is that under the law, a husband had the right to do pretty much anything he wanted to his wife, and he could even beat her as severely as he wished, as long as he didn't kill her. So there was a lot of scope for abuse within marriages, and I think that this social situation with women gathering together with their gossips to contain men and punish men was their way of acting against or getting a little bit of law on their side from a church that preached that it was okay to beat your wife, and in fact very often that it was necessary to beat your wife in order to have her behave. So that's basically it. So in the two little mini lectures and the readings, you flesh this out, and then you're going to look at the poems this week, which don't really have a lot to do with the social conditions of the lower classes, because these women did not belong to that class. But I want you to know the tensions and the stresses and the full picture of the period in which these women were working. So that's it. I will see you online.